The agenda today, we have a presentation from TJ Kartes of Butte Ag. He's going to discuss with us some of the trends, the strategies, and sort of what he and the others at Butte see in from their experience working with customers and selling seed. Sort of some of the successful strategies that they're seeing their customers employ, and some of the trends that they see around the agricultural industry and the adoption of cover crops and so forth. So. We'll have about 20-25 minutes of presentation from TJ, and then we will move to question and answer session, which will be moderated by Frank Rademacher and myself. So please, during the presentation, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and we will be collecting them, and we'll get to as many as we can during Q&A. After that, we'll share a little bit of news from around the ISAP network, and then open it up to anyone in the audience who has anything specific that they would like to share about any news around their organization or events that they would like to share. So with that, I think we're ready. TJ, we'll go ahead and get your slides shared. TJ, I'll ask you to give just a brief introduction of yourself and take it away.
Yeah, my name's TJ Kartes. I live in Butte Ag, Minnesota, which is in southern Minnesota. So Brian Whelan was going to do this. He's my counterpart in Illinois. He and his son Ethan run that side of the river, and I'm on this side of the river with a new hire, Carrie, down in Missouri. So we run the western side of the river pretty much. And I live in Minnesota where it's cold and it won't work because we're too far north and we're too wet and we don't have enough time. And we make it work really well here. So what I talk to guys as I move farther south, there's a lot more things we can do. And so I do kind of a one-on-one generalization, but it's not so much generalization. It's really what we focused on working in the north and what I feel work in your area where we go farther south, because I'll show one slide and why I feel this is very important. So let's get started with this. I always put the water bubbles up because really when you think about a lot of this conversation, it's about water. It's about clean water and keeping the Mississippi clean and keeping our wells clean and stuff like that. And that's where cover crops and reducing tillage and nutrient management really play a part. And I think that's where we're very solid with the cover crop world. So if you want to advance me. One more. Okay, so a little bit of who am I? I just told you I grew up in Butte Ag, Minnesota. Most of you don't know this, and I'll tell this quick little thing. Butte Ag is famous for one thing. We're the third best known mascot in the sports world, in high school football or high school sports. We're the Awesome Blossoms. Now, when you grow up being an awesome blossom, you got a couple life-changing factors in your life. You can get an alternative lifestyle or you can get an ag. And I chose the ag side because it seemed to fit my lifestyle way better than the other side. So not that there's anything wrong with that. I just feel this is a stronger position for me. One thing about playing football as an awesome blossom, it's really hard to play that sport being that called that. But when we beat you, it's really hard when you get beat by an awesome blossom. So we've had a really good, successful run in sports. I'm very happy to come from a small school where I was hands-on. I went to University of Minnesota, ICCON, where it was a small school where I was really hands-on. When I went to college, I should have spent more time in the horticulture department because they were learning how to feed plants and work with Mother Nature. And I was learning how to fertilize and use herbicide and do tillage. And it's really kind of contradicted what I know now and how I handle myself. I started selling cover crops 15 years ago. I started with Legacy Seeds with a gentleman by the name of Dave Robinson, who really educated me well on species election, timing, and why we do this kind of stuff. So worked for a company that raises the seed. So Butte Ag is based out of Willamette Valley in Oregon. They raise all the seed out there except for the cereals that we raise back here in the upper Midwest. So Butte Ag is, so I kind of explained who I was. The company I work for raises most of the seed out in the Willamette Valley. The small seeds like the brassicas, the legumes, the cereals we buy from licensed bonded seed companies in the upper Midwest. We buy no farm dirty seed and resell. Cala Farms is a 7,000 acre farm out in the Willamette Valley. It's operated by the Worth family and the Grocke family. We have one cleaning plant. We contract with many other growers in the valley, and we have 4 Midwest reps. There's 2 on, well, actually 3 on the east side of the river and 2 on the west side of the river, myself being one of them. Okay, you can advance the slide. Okay, so that's where I grew up, right down that little red square, right down in the very southeast corner is Butte Ag, Minnesota. And the reason I put this on, what's significant about this, is if you go east of town into that next county is where the Cedar River starts, and you can step over it there. And that's a 1.5 million acre watershed that goes to Mississippi. In the center of our county is where the Straight River watershed that goes to the Cannon starts, and that's almost a 750,000 acre watershed. So I tell everybody, we're kind of where a lot of this water starts going south. And north of me, an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours is where the Mississippi starts. And you can step over the Mississippi where it starts. So I put that picture up to show where I'm actually from. Next slide. All right. So the reason I put this slide in here to really get some context of what we're going to talk about is as you go down the Iowa-Illinois line, you can see those bumps right close to the Wisconsin border. When you get down to that next indent where it goes in, straight across in Iowa, into Nebraska, there's a really geological line there. It's south of Des Moines. From there south, what you can do is way different than what I can do in the north where I live. And even going to northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, they have a little more flexibility, but you don't go very far north and it starts to change really what you're doing. And in my world, from central Iowa north, we change on our species what we have to select. Next, please. Okay, let's get started. So what is a good way to get started? We talk about this a lot. A good way to get started in cover crop world is simple to start with and work your way up. Some guys want overwintering. Some growers want to see non-overwintering, especially in front of corn. We have canning acres. I know you guys in Illinois have canning acres, corn silage acres. You have some dairies in that area, and there's small grains that's starting to happen in your world. So these are all areas that are easy starting points to get started into the cover crop world. Next, please. Okay, so species, timings, rate are very important. So let's look at the different species. And the reason I put this slide up, okay, you can advance that next slide. I'm okay with that. Go to the next one so we keep moving here. Okay, the different types of covers. And the reason I put this slide in is this really sets the context for me for most of my presentations. Oh, you went a little too far. Got to back up. Oh, back up, please. Okay, the different types. Oh, one more. Yep, there. Cereal rye and annual ryegrass are on the top of the bottom of this grass list on the left-hand side. The reason I talk about this is we've had many times confusion of those two products. One is a cereal, the other is a true grass. Just because they're called ryegrass does not mean they're the same product. They're not the same product. Cereal rye is a cereal grain. Winter cereal rye or fall cereal rye overwinters. There's also a spring cereal rye. So as you start putting mixes together, you start buying seeds, you really have to look at where this seed came from to make sure you're buying what you think or applying what you think you're applying or putting on. So the cereals have many components. You have cereal rye, you have oats, you have triticale, you have barley, you have wheat. Those are true cereal grains. Annual ryegrass is a true grass. The scary part about annual ryegrass is there's many levels of annual ryegrass. There are diploids, tetraploids, turf, perennials. You got to watch when you're buying. So what we sell as a company is a diploid annual ryegrass, single gene ryegrass that has overwintered for us very successfully in the upper Midwest. So that being said, you have to always look at, is this going to overwinter? Sometimes annual ryegrass will overwinter. Sometimes it doesn't. But if it does, you have to have a termination plan. The cereals, if you know they're an overwintering cereal, so remember I showed you that line in Iowa and central Illinois and south, you guys can get some overwintering with your oats. Winter triticale will overwinter well. Winter rye will overwinter well. Winter wheat will overwinter well. Winter barley. Where I live in the north, winter barley has not been so successful. Wheat can be shaky, and we've never gotten winter oats to work. So we're down to 3 wintering cereals. The other part is seed sizing. Annual ryegrass is almost 200,000 seeds per pound. Cereals are about 18,000 seeds per pound. So once again, not the same product. Go to the legumes, same thing. You start looking at these different legumes. Some of these are summer legumes, more strong for the summertime and the warmth. Others take the cold better. So when you have peas, you have Austrian winter peas, you have field peas, you have forage peas. You got to really know what you're buying and where you're applying them, because the true summer peas, like a cow pea, does not take the cold in the fall. 410 forage peas, spring peas, Austrian winter peas will take the cold of the fall. So you got to actually look at what you're putting on there. Same with the clovers. Some clovers are annuals, some are biennials. Seed count on the clovers is huge. coating makes a difference. You can have anywhere from 180,000 seeds per pound up to 500,000 seeds per pound. So as you're putting mixes together, what I really tell people is you got to really look at the seed size as you're putting this stuff together. Same with the brassicas. These are the main brassicas that we sell, the radish, turnips. Winter camelina is a new one that we're really working with a lot. Canola or rapeseed. We sell rapeseed. We do not sell canola. Make sure you know you're not getting canola because canola definitely could be Roundup Ready canola. Mustards and kale. Kale is one of my favorite ones. African cabbage is something we're starting to put into this mix also. But the winter camelina is really an interesting one. It's a high seed count, works well in these mixes. It overwinters for us very successfully in the north. It'll overwinter for you guys. Rapeseed is overwintered. The farther south you go to, radishes not so much, and the kale has been kind of an on and off. The other part is the seed size. 35,000 seeds per pound in radish and 190,000, 170,000 pounds in kale. So as once again, when you put mixes together, you got to really look at these seed per this count, seeds per pound count, so you know what you're putting together as you do these mixes. And that's why I start this out. So let's look at some mix ideas. Okay, go ahead. So this is kind of a busy slide. You guys can look it over, but it really breaks down. This is Brian's slide from Illinois that he's talking about the different mixes and timing. My world, as I move farther north through in Iowa into Minnesota, we kind of limit these down a little bit, but it's a really good slide to look at to show how he's kind of divided these mixes out and what he's trying to work with. And this is mainly soybeans going to corn. A lot of guys with soybeans going to corn are really nervous about overwintering. And I get that. You don't want too big a mess in front of your corn. So Brian's really tailored these down to looking at, are they going to overwinter? They're not going to overwinter. And then how aggressive is this mixes? So let's look at some mixes as we go forwards, please. So this is a real standard winter kill mix. I use roughly the same thing in the north, 40 pounds of oats, 3 pounds of radish. A lot of times I will try to add kale into this mix also at a pound of kale, maybe 2 pounds of radish because of the seed sizes. But this is a really good one that's going to winter kill for you. It's going to grow well in the fall, way late in the fall. It's going to grow down below freezing temperatures several nights. And it's going to give you deep rooting. It's going to give you great fibrous rooting out of the small grains. And it's going to actually get, you're going to get the nice taproot out of it, out of the radish. I prefer getting a little bit more of the diversity package here, but I try to at least get some kale in this mix also. One more ahead, please. Okay, upgrade. And he always talks about upgrading. If you want to spend a little more money, you could go 40 pounds of oats, or you could use the barley at this point, would work well. Pound and a half radish, pound and a half of kale or cabbage, half pound of turnip, to a pound of turnip. So the nice part about this is you're getting 3 different brassicas that are going to live at different time phases in the fall. You get that great oat crop out there. Oats are a super crop for us to put out in the soil. They talk about cleansing the soil and flushing out a lot of your heavy metals out of the soil with oats. Barley does the same thing. It grows long in the fall. It gives you great ground protection in the spring. Gives you nice protection to your cover crops in the fall. And those are all things we're trying to constantly accomplish, is keep covering all this up and protecting the crop that's growing. And I really like oats. I think it's something that we can use, we can fly on, we can drill. It's such a universal spring grain to utilize for non-overwintering because it lives long in the fall. For you guys, the farther south you go into Illinois and even southern Iowa, there's oats that have lived for over the winter. You know, we've had that happen different times. So I really like oats. I think it's one of those that we just overlook. Any of my overwintering mixes always put oats in them too. Advance, please. Go ahead and advance it, please. There we go. Okay. Now, in my world, the farther north we go, we look at using a drill. So we have guys that have drills that have set up where they're going to drill between the old row and leave a spot to strip till or no-till corn. In this point, we're starting to use winter triticale as an overwintering in front of our corn versus winter rye. We've been very successful with this. We're very happy about the way this is working. It's easy to terminate. You're getting great cover crop protection between the rows. You're getting the scavenging of the nutrients like you want out of the cereals. You're getting a lot of good things, but you're leaving that spot to strip till or no-till and apply fertility for your corn crop. The first slide was going in the fall. This slide is actually in the spring after the guy planted his corn. Corn looked fantastic. He terminated the cereal and he had camelina, and he had vetch in this mix, and he drilled the first week of October in southern Minnesota, really pushing the gamut, but it worked out well. He had a wonderful catch with this, grew along in the fall, was there in the spring, planted his corn, terminated with his post-application pass. So as we start doing covers, we always got to talk about if it overwinters, how do we terminate in the spring? If it doesn't overwinter, but something to escape, how do we get rid of that in the springtime? So this is a prime example of an area where we've adapted some machinery to actually precision place cover crops between the rows to do a specific job for us. And I really like this idea. I think this is something that's going to keep advancing. We've actually built some more machinery to move this forward. So next slide, please. This is really interesting. We're using drones more and more, we use planes also. But this is a drone application of 20 pounds oats, a pound of camelina, and a pound of kale, qualified for NRCS specs. He applied it at leaf drop of soybeans, got a great catch, strip tilled it. So he called me up, the grower did, and he said, I'm going to strip till out some of the cover crop. I said, that's called green manure. There is nothing wrong with that. Incorporate it in the ground. He's got a fantastic growth. This grew until about the first week of December in my world. This mix could grow for you guys until the end of December, depending on how cold and how much snow you get. But that's really a great example of it's all going to winter kill. And no, wait a minute, excuse me. This did not have camelina. Let me back up. It had kale and turnips in it and the oats. So it did not have camelina. He did not want anything overwintering. So this did not have overwintering in it. It was a non-overwintering mix, which he wanted in front of his corn. He's a little nervous about overwintering yet in front of his corn. In front of soybeans, he's got overwintering all day long, and I'll discuss that as we go. But this is an area where we used the drones, worked out really well. We could have flown this on with a plane, but we got it in early enough to get good growth out of it. Really nice establishment, worked well in the fall, scavenged a lot of nutrients out of the soil, broke up compaction with the brassicas growing, and really had a nice stop to strip till into it. He made the comment when he strip till, and he thought that the strip tiller worked better because he thought the ground was more tilthy. So visual thought from a grower. Next slide, please. So I can't use most of this in my world, the farther north from that line I showed you guys, but you guys can. So oats, crimson clover, balanza clover, hairy vetch. The farther south, we can get more of the legumes to work a little bit better. The farther north we go, our growing season shortens up enough where we have a harder time getting this to really take off and get great growth out of the legume portion of it. If we're going to use legumes the farther north you move in the US, we have to establish them earlier, like after small grains, corn silage, first part of September. This mix can go up to October 1 in your world and have a terrific in Illinois and down, have terrific growth. And you're getting a nice brassica or you're getting a nice legume oat package in front of your corn. Balanza could overwinter for you. Hairy vetch would overwinter for you. You might have to terminate them in the spring with herbicide. Common vetch has kind of been a maybe, maybe not. If it does, you have to get rid of it with herbicide. So I really like this one. I think there's some great opportunity for the farther south we go to utilize this. The farther north, out of this mix, if I was going to do this in Minnesota or Iowa, I'd use the 4 pounds of hairy vetch and the oats, and I'd probably put a brassica with it because I just can't get crimson and balanza to grow enough to justify the costs the farther north I go. Next slide, please. This is a picture of that. This is a great slide. It really shows excellent growth of what it's doing. And so you get a nice growth like that. Look how green it's looking. It's sucking up nutrients, breaking up compaction. You're starting to fix nitrogen in those legumes, and they're going to keep the biological alive for you, which is really good. It's putting carbon in the soil. So this is really an excellent job of getting a really nice diverse legume oat mix in front of corn for next year. Next slide, please. So let's go on to if you want an overwintering from corn to soybeans. And the one that just works most of the time, hardly have any trouble with it, is winter cereal rye. Or if you buy it out of Canada like we do, it's called fall rye. 35 to 60 pounds is really a good stand. You can fly it on, you can drill it. You can go way late in the fall drilling, vertical till it in, spread it with a fertilizer spreader and incorporate it. There's a lot of great opportunities for cereal rye. The farther north we go, we always make sure we add some camelina to it if we want to. We see some great opportunities with the camelina the farther north we go. And this mix also gives us two different sets of roots. We get the fibrous root. The thing we love to get cereal rye in front of corn is one big issue I come up with all the time. It's a great nitrogen scavenger. If I'm going to fly a mix of this on earlier in the year, I'll put oats with it to try to really scavenge as much nitrogen out of that corn crop as I can, in case it's loose and not being used. I don't want it going down the river somewhere. So I really love to get oats in this mix if I'm flying it early. But if I'm not, if I'm just doing cereal and it's getting later, I can just put cereal rye out there, the vertical tiller, drill it. It'll grow in the fall. They'll root deep in the fall. They'll come in the spring. You have a nice package in front of soybeans, helps with weed suppression. It breaks down fast and gives the nitrogen back to the soybeans. They'll utilize it much as they can and hold it for next year's corn crop. Move ahead, please. Okay, this is a picture of one of my growers that drilled it at a 15-inch angle. It had a great stand. This was 40 pounds. Looks wonderful. Had camelina in it at 1 pound. The camelina was there. The rye was there. This is in the fall. The next spring it came up. Next picture, please. I'll show you what it looks like when they planted soybeans into it. There's it's terminated out and the soybeans are growing. So it really is good, great. Look at the great armament to the ground cover there, keeping the soybean diseases in the soil, not letting them bounce up on the beans, helping with weed suppression, breaking up compaction. This is starting to break down fast. It's going to start giving those nutrients back to the soybeans. So cereal rye is one of those that's just a great rock star in front of beans. It's a no-brainer. I really like using it there. I think that's a great point. I love getting a little more stuff with it. If we can get brassicas with it, so if we fly it early, I always try to put some kale with it, some radishes with it. We put some oats with it. So we do a little more advanced mix. But the longer in the fall you go, it comes down to winter rye and it comes down to camelina. It gets to be kind of the set at the end, but it really works well. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've started to work a lot the farther north we go. And I think in Illinois, this is something that really needs to be looked at also, is we get run out of time in the fall. Even in a longer season, you run out of time in the fall. So we've started to work at this V2 to V5 interseeding. And the thing when you start working at that, and this is where we really start to look at annual ryegrass. And in Illinois, you guys can use annual ryegrass sooner than I can. I get to the point where I can't use it late in the fall. So this is when we've been able to get annual ryegrass really into our system. If we don't have small grains or canning acres or something we can do in September, we can do this. So we're starting to work on V2, V3 corn, doing the early interseeding. It's more of an advanced program. We've had it over winter. This could be grazed. We could put manure into this, which is really big because we're having a lot of conversations about the CAFOs up here and having a cover crop established for them to apply manure into. It's really getting big conversation. So this is where I think we can utilize the idea of adding the annual ryegrass into a corn crop earlier, going back to corn on corn or soybeans and showing some really great benefits to it. Next picture, please. So here it's growing and this is in southern Minnesota. This is 2 rows of annual ryegrass at 14 pounds. This is 1.5 pounds of kale and is 1 pound of turnip. Qualified for all the NRCS spec programs that we had. He drilled it with a machine and he side dressed nitrogen at the same time. So we're doing 2 applications as we're doing this. Herbicide is a big part of this. You really got to look at herbicide 1 and 2 years prior to this. But once you get onto this, this program really works well, and you can get a really nice establishment of annual ryegrass in the fall or in the earliest part of the season. The beauty of annual ryegrass is it goes dormant during the growing season. So it's not going to advance into your corn crop or hurt your corn crop. It's going to sit there dormant and then it's going to keep coming back. The brassicas will keep growing. We've done root pits. We've found the corn roots wrapped around the brassica roots and they're moist and wet. So it's really a great thing. I believe it's a vessel of nutrients. So that's earlier in the season. Next picture, please. This is as the season's going on. Look how healthy that corn looks. This corn yielded 215 bushels by Northfield, Minnesota, which is in 3rd-tier counties of Minnesota. So it's not way far north, but it's farther north than you guys are. That was in the about August, first part of September range. The corn was just going to start to nest back. Next picture. This is way late in the fall after harvest. That to me is wonderful because we got a great great diverse cover crop out there. Most of that's going to die except for the annual ryegrass is going to overwinter. I think this is really something we have to look going forwards on to have multiple ways of applying cover crops. Like I said, in the north, we have to work on different ideas. With you guys, farther south and in Illinois, southern Iowa, you have a little bit longer season, but the workload gets to be the big part of this, trying to get all this done at a certain period of time. And I can tell you right now, my sons run a custom business and we run our wheels off all fall trying to get this done for everybody because everybody wants it done. It's awesome. They want us to be out there, but we can only cover so many acres in so many days and move. This is going to give us, so we just built another machine from Henniker to do this again, to be able to side dress nitrogen and apply this cover crop. So now we're going to do that earlier in the season. Then we'll have our small grain no-till drill and vertical till that we run all fall. So we're trying to figure out a way to do multiple applications of covers. I believe this can go as far south as you want it to go. And the one thing with the annual ryegrass farther south, it's going to overwinter more than likely. And to terminate this, you got to follow rules. Next 3 days can't get cold at night, but spray between 9 and 3 and make sure you buffer your solution so you have a good, nice, even pH on your herbicide, and you can kill annual ryegrass. If a brassica overwinters, a broadleaf killer takes care of it. So I really think this is something that's going to be the next level of going to the cover crop world. Like I said, in your world, you can add other stuff to it sooner into your mixes, where we get a little limited on time. So I think that's where we're starting to advance this system for us, is add this cover crop at V2, V3 to it. Next screen, please. Okay, my take-home message is really simple. There's always a way to put cover crops out there. You can frost seed, which I didn't hit on, and Brian talks about that. You guys do some frost seeding. We do frost seeding here too. You can work it in all farming systems. If you're corn, soybeans, corn on corn, that's where that interseeding comes in. There's always a way to work this into your system. It becomes a management piece. And the benefits going forwards of nutrient reduction, herbicide reduction, compaction alleviation, fuel savings, because you're not making as many trips. And when you do it, the ground is tiltier and pulls easier. All those things are big parts of why this is an economic piece too. Work with seed suppliers and farmers that have done this before. I tell everybody, find a good mentor group and work with them. I've made a crap load of mistakes up here in the north, and I'll tell you every one of them I made because I don't want to see you do it again. So the beauty of it is we've done enough errors. We've had some confusing stuff. We've had some stuff get out of control, but we've never lost a cash crop over any of this, which I always tell everybody, we've never lost a cash crop. We maybe have, I'll be honest, we maybe have dinged it a hair, but when we look at our ROI at the end of the day, we're usually always positive yet because we didn't spend as much on something else. Use funding to get started. So if you're NRCS people and you have funding available, get out to the producers, talk about how you're going to work with them. Start them out easy, simple, and slow. Work with a good seed supplier that's going to give you as much education as possible so that you move up the ladder. You don't want to start at that V3, V2, V3 seeding like I showed you at the end. That is more an advanced port. Start with the cereal rye going to corn, and start with maybe a non-wintering, overwintering mix going to soybeans, or soybeans going to corn. Work on that kind of stuff because you can make this work on any system, but use the funding available, because if the funding get utilized, they know what we're trying to accomplish out here. And we want to keep them realizing that we are trying to build this system of resiliency, keep the water clean, keep the Mississippi clean, keep the Ohio clean, wherever you're calling from or listening in from, keep it all clean so the Gulf is clean so we don't have anything leaving the farm. The other thing for the producer is if he's paid for the fertility, you want to keep it where it's at. And these cover crops can really, really help with all this stuff. Next slide, please. All right, there's our contact information. Your contact in Illinois be Brian or his son, Ethan. I'm on the other side of the river. So if you're in Minnesota, Iowa, anywhere to the west, give me a shout. If you have any other questions, don't be, even if you're in Illinois and you say, hey, I want to ask you something about how you do this in the north, just always reach out. We're a complete open book. We want to work with everybody. That's all I have. I kind of went through it fast, but I figure we got to leave some time for questions, seems like I got us all off tilter today.
No, we're right on time, TJ. We're doing well. We do have a few questions, and Frank and I will kind of ping pong back and forth with a few of these questions. I'll go ahead and kick it off. The first one I'm going to share actually as kind of a two-parter here. But what are your thoughts on split applying covers? For example, drone applying some clovers and brassicas, then harvest the crop and drill grasses. And then on the flip side of that, what are your thoughts on split termination of cover crops, killing the grasses and letting the legumes and broadleaves grow?
I think that is a great way of doing it. And I have some growers in central Minnesota that's what they're doing. They have a young gentleman who has a drone. He wants to stay busy. So we've done a mix for him of legumes and brassicas, kale, excuse me, kale. We put some turnips. We actually put some crimson at that point, and they flew that into the beans when they're just starting to yellow, or the corn was just starting to turn a little bit where you could see some sunlight. And then they came back and put their cereal grains out there with a drill. And it really is an awesome way of doing it. They only hold back. People say to me all the time, is it's 2 applications, it's double the cost. It can be, but we've worked some ideas with some of the, like one drone guy about he's going to get some termination work with it now. So he's kind of doing a split application because of that. So he's kind of cut his cost down, or his price down to these growers a little bit. So I think it's a great way of doing it. I love the idea. The split termination, I think that is great too if you're prepared to manage that legume and brassica still growing. So once again, always remember, in the early seasons of all these crops, they are taking nitrogen, they are taking NP and K out of the soil because they're trying to grow too. So as long as the fertility program is there real well, you'll be fine. I love that idea. I think that's great. I got one grower that's actually going to take he has a chemical bander that he had years ago when he ridge till, and he's going to go and clean up over his row and let everything else grow a little bit longer and do a post application. So I think it's great if you're ready to manage that growth coming with your crop, because that is the part that scares the snot out of a lot of people really bad and scares the willies out of agronomists. Trust me, that's when the agronomists call us and say, what are you doing to my grower? I'm not doing nothing to your grower. He wants to do this. So I think it's great if you're willing to absorb the 2 cost application. And if that stuff gets out of control, you got to be prepared to take care of it. Great question, though.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. I think that's a strategy that we've thought about, and there's probably times I should have used it. A split termination, I think, and maybe you can, if you have thoughts on this, but a lot of times we make a mix, and I'm making this mix, in August, not knowing what our fall, winter, and spring weather is going to be, and depending on what crop conditions turn out to be in that weather, sometimes there's a little bit more grass that emerged in that mix and took off compared to what I was kind of hoping for. And so I think that's a good strategy. Even maintenance, if the mix sometimes doesn't turn out to be what you want it to be, and it's a little heavy in some species, that can save your cash crop a little bit. The question I've got here is also a two-parter. So why should growers consider a named cover crop variety versus like a VNS lot? And then, when would the use cases for each of those be? Is there an appropriate use where you always want to hit a named cover crop variety, or versus, something that a VNS is always good for?
That's an excellent question. And when I do a longer presentation, I really hit on that slide with the grasses, legs, and brassicas when we talk about this. So let's start with the grasses with the VNS. Most of our cereals that we're bringing in, we know that they're Hazlitt or Ryman is a very common cereal variety. There might be some Albon, there might be some Rustic, but we know that a lot of them are tagged as a VNS, but we know from the suppliers what they are. I'm fine with that. Winter triticale the same way. I'm fine with it being a VNS. Most of it is, there's about 3 companies, there's Fridge and 2 other ones that's what they are. That's okay. The scary part of VNS is, so let's use brassicas to start with. VNS in the brassica world, like rapeseed, could be Roundup Ready canola. And like I said earlier, we do not want Roundup Ready canola in our world, because now you're spraying it and it's not dying. We had that issue several years ago. A guy brought a load of fertilizer down from Canada who had hauled Roundup Ready canola, dumped the fertilizer, thought the hopper was clean, wasn't his fault, thought it was clean, dumped it, ended up getting Roundup Ready canola in a soybean field, and they ended up hiring Hispanic laborers to walk the field and pull all the canola. Cost the co-op a lot of money because they walked it 5 times to clean up that mess. Wasn't the grower's fault. Wasn't the herbicide's fault. It was they got something wrong. So you buy a VNS in Nebraska world, like rapeseed VNS, could be Roundup Ready canola. You don't know. It's VNS variety, not stated. In the legume world, not quite as big an issue with that. I mean, most of that stuff, if it's a red clover, it's a red clover, crimson clover is crimson clover. We don't see quite as much of the VNS problem there. In the true grass world, annual rye grass, be very careful getting that VNS. Make sure you know what you're buying, because VNS annual rye grass could be a tetraploid, it could be a diploid, it could be a turf, it could be the stuff from Australia that came in the south and somebody harvested that's actually truly resistant to Roundup. You don't want those things. You do not want VNS. And if you do buy it, you're not sure what you're getting, you could have a mess. It could be 4 species of ryegrass in that bag, all diploids, but each one breaks dormancy at a different time. And now you don't get it terminated. You don't get it terminated. You don't get it terminated. So cereals, not quite as worried. And the ryegrasses or the grasses, absolutely make sure you know what you're buying. Legumes, I'd still caution. I'd rather have you buy a name brand. In the Nebraska world, absolutely buy a name brand, because VNS could be a lot of different things. There was a time years ago, a guy bought radishes, and he bought from a company that buys garden seed varieties out, and he got radishes. He got little red radishes, not a daikon radish. It was a radish. I mean, it said radish on the bag. It did not say daikon or a brand name. It just said radish. And he calls me, he goes, "What is this?" And I'm like, "Garden radishes. They're delicious, planted in the fall." While I was eating them, he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "They're really good. They're sweeter in the fall." He said, "You got a really nice crop. You should call the farmer's market and sell these things." He goes, "I bought tubers." I said, "No, you didn't. You bought something you didn't know what you bought." So he bought garden radishes, because the guy buys all garden lots and dumps it in the bag. And he bought a radish. It said VNS radish. So the cereal's not quite as concerned, but the rest of it, yes, I would buy a name brand. I really would. And I'm not saying that just because I'm a seed guy. I'm saying it because I don't want people to have those conversations of, what is this?
The
Yeah,
old adage, you get what you pay for.
yeah,
Yep.
and I think especially as cover crop breeding takes off, which I think you're a lot more of. I think there's a lot of species that some named varieties that have some great improvements over their more conventional older counterparts. So yeah, it's something to consider. You can certainly make your money back on it, certainly in headaches. Thanks, TJ.
Well, even with turnips, you take turnips, there's Appin turnips, there's purple top turnips, there's other ones. Once again, there too, know what you're buying, because they don't have the same bulb network underneath them. And if you're looking for that big bulb of a purple top turnip, you buy an Appin and it's more of a little white bulb, you're going to be like kind of upset with what you bought.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be our last question, but I'll go ahead and ask it. So you mentioned briefly winter camelina with cereal rye before a soybean crop. So my question is right along those lines. Here in Illinois, most of our cover crop acres are just straight cereal rye going into soybeans. Curious, what are your I don't know, maybe a pet project? What do you like to see paired with cereal rye to bring a little added diversity, or just to change up the straight cereal rye before soybeans? What is a good option for somebody to try who's looking to expand their, from a monoculture cereal rye to something with a little more diversity?
Right. So I just did this for 2 of our counties in Minnesota. We talked about add more diversity. So if you're going earlier, so let's start a time frame. So say you're the end of August into the middle of September, you're flying it on high clearance, whatever. I love getting cereal rye out there. I love at that point 10 to 15 pounds of oats in that mix. Oats is going to live long in the fall. It's going to scavenge up all those nutrients. It's going to bust up that heavy metal situation you have going. At that point, I always try to get like a kale or a non-overwintering brassica in front of it, because it's a little bit early to put the camelina in at that point. We've had to get too big and it doesn't overwinter as well. So a lot of times we'll get a kale in there. If guys want radishes, I'll put radish in at that point if they still want to do it. So I'll do like a 2 brassica mix and a two cereal mix with the cereal rye. So I'll cut the cereal rye down about 30 pounds at that point, and then get the oats and the rest of it in the mix, especially if you're flying, because the planes charge based off pounds. So you got to start worrying about the pounds of that mix and the ferrying and everything. High clearance machines the same way. They can carry a little bit more, so the poundage isn't quite as strong. Start to get into September, end of September into October. We're going to whittle down what we can do. I usually pull the oats out after October 1. I go with the winter camelina and I go with the cereal rye at that point. And the reason I want to get those brassicas in there, I want that tuber plant busting up compaction, aerating the soil, scavenging P and K, all the micronutrients that it pulls up. I want it doing its job in the soil to really get that cottage cheese look in a few years of the soil. So I really like getting those brassicas in there. When we get in the later in the fall, then it gets down to cereal rye and camelina. And the thing I like about camelina is bred in the north. It comes out of NDSU. It's going to overwinter for us very successfully. It's going to give you a nice, it's not real super aggressive in the fall, but in the spring it takes off and gets a nice tuber underneath it with lateral roots off the side. It's a high seed count, so a pound or two goes a long ways. And it's pretty cost effective now at that rate. So I love getting that. So now we have a brassica that lives a different microbe system off it. It's sucking out carbon out of the air and putting it in a different way. And we have a fibrous root system out there. So if you're going earlier in the year, I like to get 3-4 things going. When you get later, it gets down to the cereal rye and camelina. But I still love to get 2 things going at the best of my ability.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, TJ. It was great answers, great presentation. I think that's probably about all we have time for now. If we want to just go ahead and share our final slides, we appreciate your time, TJ. We have just I think maybe one slide and a poll here. So, if there is anything else anyone else on the call would like to share in terms of events or field days, webinars, additional opportunities, please feel free to share that with us and take some time to complete the exit poll. Once again, TJ, we very much appreciate your time, and I think we did fine getting through our technical difficulties this morning. We appreciate everybody's patience with all that. So, yeah, we hope to see everybody again next month. Same time, same place.